The world is becoming increasingly complex and volatile. How can we make sense of it all?
I'm Richard Engel.
And I'm Yalda Hakim.
And we present Sky News' latest podcast, The World. Each week, we'll cut through the noise to guide you through the week's global events and explain to you why what happens out there matters to you wherever you are.
We're on the ground in some of the world's toughest places. Listen now to The World with Richard Engel and me, Yalda Hakim, wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi everyone, Neil Patterson here, and while the Daily is on its Christmas break, we thought we'd replay you some of the more memorable episodes we recorded in 2024. Back in August, Oasis announced they were getting the band back together for a series of concerts that of course quickly sold out, though not every fan was happy with the price they eventually paid. Standing in for me on this episode, host Liz Bates speaks to Terry Christian, the man who gave Oasis their first TV appearance on The Word, and discusses Liam and Noel's brotherly love, or lack thereof, with Neil McCormick from The Telegraph and Sky's Katie Spencer. Stay where you are.
Sorry, what decade is it again? The Labour Party is back in power. I've just seen someone with a Rachel from Friends haircut. And now Oasis are getting back together. Is it me, or is it all feeling very mid-90s at the moment? For those of us who can remember Oasis the first time round, they were the soundtrack of our lives back then. So let's indulge in some 90s nostalgia. This is Liz Bates, standing in for Neil. And earlier I opened the floodgates on X, formerly Twitter. And this is what we got back. So Matt said, "Be Here Now came out the summer I did my GCSEs. I worked on a fruit farm and listened to it on my Walkman, if you can remember those, on repeat for 6 weeks." This is from Duncan. When What's the Story Morning Glory was released in October 1995, I'd just passed my driving test and drove from Rotherham to Blackpool to see them at the Empress Ballroom. The Verve were meant to support, but they'd broken up. What a day. And Anthony got more than just his ticket as a souvenir from a Manchester gig in 1997. He queued all day, got to the front and caught Liam's tambourine at the end. Lucky man. So Matt, Duncan, Anthony and anyone else who spent the day explaining Main Road, the Blur rivalry and why The Word was such good telly, this episode of The Daily is for you. We'll talk about why they're doing it now, the money they're going to make and if Liam and Noel can stay friends for a whole year and a bit. But first, back to the Channel 4 show The Word and the man who gave Oasis their national TV debut, Terry Christian.
Oasis represented the culmination of a period which became known as Manchester, really, from 1989 through to 91. You know, one of them worked for the Inspiral Carpets, Noel. The other one was mad on the Stone Roses and wanted to be Ian Brown, you know, his brother Liam. They were all inspired by that Manchester era, and they just came bursting through and took everyone by surprise because that was the last thing the kind of Southern press and the hush-puppied mafia wanted was Manchester happening again. So they ended up packaging them up and calling them Britpop, but it was basically Manchester Part 2. And it was very northern, it was very working class, you know, say with the kids of immigrants. None of their parents were born in the UK. They were all born in the Republic of Ireland. And in many ways, they represented the 1990s. There was a vibe with the rave scene of people coming together, a sense of community amongst young people because they'd been kind of put on the scrap heap by, you know, Thatcher's government for years, you know, like you didn't count if you were young. So I think there was that kind of special vibe. And I think they represented that.
They sort of encapsulated a bit of what was going on in society at the time. You heard them really, really early on in their career because of what you were doing at the time as a radio broadcaster. So what was it that made them so special?
Well, I'd been to see them live. I didn't think there was anything special. The only thing that made me think that they might make it, if I ever go and see a new band, what I used to do and still do to a degree is I would look at the lead singer and think, if I was a 15-year-old kid sitting in a council house, would I want to be him? If I was a 15-year-old girl in my council house, would I fancy him? So that you had it there, didn't you, with Liam Gallagher? He had a better voice than Ian Brown. Their music wasn't quite as clever as the Stone Roses, but it had that vibe about it and that energy, especially on the first album. You know, Rock and Roll Star, to me, is one of the greatest kind of working class scally anthems ever. You know, just that opening line, you know, find myself in the city. There's no easy way out. It kind of summed up to me that feeling when you grew up in working class areas. And that's what Oasis meant to me. They had that kind of a poignancy, a vibe. The Smiths had a similar thing. Morrissey's lyrics, that feeling about the guitar. And I think that's what Oasis had. The first person actually to play them on the radio before they actually had a record out was Craig Cash, of the Royal Family.
Yeah.
Dave out of the Royal Family. He was mad on Oasis. He was playing them way before. And then, of course, he used Half the World Away for the Royal Family theme tune. I was hearing about them more. It took me 8 weeks to get them on the word because we had this music booker at the time said, Terry, we can't have two bands from Manchester on the same show. And I went, well, you'd have two bands from London on the same show. And they went, well, that's different. I said, yes, you haven't had a music scene since punk in 1976. And so in the end, the band pulled out and we got Oasis on. And, and they were fantastic. I was worried because the last time I'd seen them, they weren't great. Liam had sung most of the set with his back to the audience. But obviously the people who were telling me that they were really good, I trusted. And when they came on the word and I saw them in the rehearsal, because our show was live, I thought, wow, good. I felt so relieved.
Was that the first moment that you thought, wow, these are a really good band?
Well, yeah. And then also Liam's confidence was amazing. If you watch that back, to do national TV, and at the time we were getting a 49% audience share. We had like 2.5 to 3 million viewers every week. So for them to go on a live show like that, and it was purely live, and just to perform in that way when no one had heard of them, this was 3 weeks before the single even came out.
Tell me about their relationship, because they've been openly hating each other basically for the last decade. Were you surprised to see that they wanted to reunite?
Because they were quite spoilt kids, but they were very competitive. They were a little bit mean-spirited with each other. They were all very different characters, actually. So, so looking from the outside, I can see that. Because, part of Liam's appeal is basically he was still a 14-year-old. Even now, younger lads like Liam, don't they?
Do you think the hostility, is it real, do you think?
I think with the Gallaghers, it's that whole thing. I think the drugs played a part. I think Liam's behaviour was out of control. And then I think also there was that Noel basically sacked all the band that had been Liam's band. Oasis was Liam's name for the band, and it was all his old mates, wasn't it? Bonehead, Paul McGuigan, Tony McCarroll, and one by one they all got booted out by Noel. So there's all sorts of stuff. But look, I think with the mother, the way she is, I think she'll be close to all the grandkids the same. And the awkwardness will be not being able to have a proper family do, where Noel is there as well. And I think maybe that's sorted it out. And I think Liam will have changed. He'll have changed quite a lot.
Yeah. So you see them getting to the end of this tour?
Oh, yeah, I do. I think all this idea that they're going to be ending up having a fight backstage at Cardiff after the first gig, I don't think there's a chance of that. I think that will have all been well and truly sorted out, before they set foot there.
And do you want to go see them?
I might do, but also going to see gigs is a bit of a busman's holiday to me. So I turn down tickets a lot of the time. I could have gone to see New Order the other night, but it's like, even my 22-year-old, if I play a guitar band, he looks at me as if I'm playing umpire band music. And yet, funny enough, he said, Dad, can you get us tickets for Oasis? And it's the kind of the Liam factor and the vibe factor. They want to feel that vibe, don't they, of 80,000 people singing along to a sort of soundtrack of the 90s.
We'll take a quick break now, and when we come back, we'll be asking if this reunion will have a bit of that 90s drink and drugs-fuelled chaos that Terry was just talking about, or if it will be a bit of a calmer, more commercial affair. Every fan remembers when they first heard Oasis, including music journalists Neil McCormick, the Telegraph's chief music critic, and Katie Spencer, Sky's arts and entertainment correspondent.
I was the perfect age for getting into Oasis and Blur. I was 15, 16 when Definitely Maybe came out. And I just remember it was one of those albums where it just, if you're that sort of early teen age where you're kind of fighting to escape your childhood, to be a bit rebellious, songs like Cigarettes and Alcohol, being with my friends and sort of trying to sneak into clubs and feeling like you were kind of, they were a voice that represented you, because they were working class boys singing about kind of wanting to be rock stars and wanting to have this champagne lifestyle, and they did it, and they were just a thrill to kind of hear play, and a thrill to share amongst your group of friends.
You know, I was in my early 30s when it all kicked off, and I was just as perfect an age. I was so excited by the arrival of Oasis. I'd come out of this 80s band scene. I'd been in bands and it all got a bit dull. And then this band appeared that just carried this wave of excitement with them. I sort of caught up with them when they were kind of at Astoria level, I think was where I first saw them, and watched them, you know, blitz through to arenas and stadiums. I was at Nebworth. I was starting to write about music, and they were the big story. Got to know them. I spent some time with them in their crazy ways, and I just was fantastically fascinated and excited by the way a band could stir the whole country, which it really did. They put music at the center of the news agenda, which is here where we are again. It's so unusual to be talking about a band on a news program.
Yeah, so how big of a deal is this, the fact that they are reuniting? It seemed for a long time that there was no way that we were ever going to see Liam and Noel on stage together, because they just hate each other so much.
I thought we would always see them on stage again. You know, they've lived on this insulting trading of insults, but in a way that's part of what's kept them alive. It's very significant because bands are not a thing anymore, and Oasis are a thing. We're all of slightly different ages, but I've been at Liam Gallagher shows, and there are people in their 20s. There are people who weren't born when Oasis ruled the roost, who treat Liam as the last of the rock stars, which he is. They embody something about music in this country that is actually significant.
Katie, can I ask you to give us some details of the tour? What's it going to be like? Where are we going to see them? How easy is it going to be to get tickets? Can you get some for me?
Well, yeah, not at this stage. Get back to me closer to the time, and I will try my very best, Liz. But obviously my needs come first. But at the moment, 4 nights in Wembley, 4 nights in Manchester. That was a given. They had to play some Heaton Park gigs and play to their home crowd. 2 nights in Cardiff, perhaps not quite so expected. 2 nights in Dublin as well, so they're heading over to Ireland, and 4 nights in Edinburgh as well. It does feel like they're putting in the legwork, and they are going around the whole of the country. They're making sure that they kind of stop off in all the different locations.
If it is about money, they're certainly giving the fans their money's worth. So give me a sense of, I have to admit, I've never actually been to an Oasis gig.
Okay.
What are they like?
No crowd sings louder than an Oasis crowd sings. People have been talking about Taylor Swift's crowd singing at Wembley, and it was fantastic, but they will be drowned out by the decibels of 90,000 people singing every word and phrase of Oasis songs with every nuance from the start to the finish. I once saw 50,000 people at Wembley singing the whole of Don't Look Back in Anger while Noel strummed the guitar. It was just the biggest mass choir. He didn't even sing, he just played it, and the crowd sang it. They're very singable songs, and they've really embedded themselves in the culture. The band don't do anything, they just stand there and bang it out. It's the least effortful show you'll ever see, but they just have the magic.
Well, this is what Liam's been doing as well, though, hasn't it? Liam effectively has been doing the reunion tour just on his own, hasn't he? And it's been hugely popular, and fans have gone in their droves up and down the country to sing along and relive the nostalgia. I think it's the chemistry, though, that will be so different. But also, we don't know what the rest of the lineup is. I was asking the publicist this morning what the whole of the band's going to be, and all we know at this stage is it's Noel and Liam.
Have there been any signs that there are kind of tensions thawing between them? Or did this kind of come out of the blue a little bit?
Well, Noel said some nice things about Liam singing, which makes a change from saying a couple of years ago that he couldn't stand to listen to his voice.
But it was a great quote. He said that his own voice is like drinking a pint of Guinness on a Tuesday, but his brother's voice, he says, is like having 10 shots of tequila on a Friday night. And it is the raucous sort of side you get from Liam.
They're so inventive in their insults for each other, aren't they? It's like they sit at home at night thinking about how to insult each other.
They are so different. Noel he's a very funny guy. He's a smart guy. He's quite measured. He's tended to talk for a long time about Oasis as if he had PTSD. I mean, when he says something, he doesn't even go on social media. He says occasional things in interviews that seem designed to wind Liam up, whereas Liam just goes off on wild tangents of mad insults. He's always been like that. It's part of what makes him so electrifying. I mean, he doesn't do much except somehow embody this rock and roll spirit, and Noel gives him the music. I do think you have to remember that they're brothers. You know, anybody with siblings can look at all that insult and wonder how deeply they take it, because families do get over things. One of the interesting things, I think, is that the mother has been pushing for them to reconcile for a few years. And I think this reconciliation might have really happened a year ago around her 80th birthday. The range of insults has definitely been lower this year. And I don't think it's about the money, you know. I obviously the money is a huge lure, but there's also just an absolute belief in this band. Liam is the biggest fan of Oasis. He said he'll do it for free, and Noel has said he doesn't need the money. I mean, Oasis are still in the top 40 British artists in the world right now.
They don't need the money, but it's expected it'll net them £400 million from doing this.
Well, I was going to ask, are they going to make a lot of money? They may not need it, but is it going to make a lot of money?
Oh, absolutely. It will absolutely make them a small fortune going back on the road. And of course, we're talking about the UK leg. What they're alluding to and what they've announced today is that they will be taking this outside of Europe and around the world. So if they can manage to stay friends.
I think there'll be lots of falling out. I think that Liam is a bit more mature than he was, and he won't wind his brother up so much. I think the setup around them will largely keep them apart. You know, there's a lot riding on it. I don't think they'll split up.
It must have been so exciting for you to hang around with them back in the day, though.
Yeah, music was less controlled. You know, it's mad now when you're in the music business now. You know, you get 40 minutes with a star on Zoom with their publicist hanging over their shoulder, correcting everything they might or might not say. I mean, Oasis were drinking in the same pubs as the music journalists. You know, you wonder about backstage. I've seen, you know, Liam getting absolutely smashed in a bar, picking up a charming woman of the night and disappearing, and the drugs would be out. There would be sort of chaos going around. No, always just standing there being funny and droll, but right in front of all the media in a way that you wouldn't get now. I hope we do get it.
We should say the quality of their gigs used to vary wildly as well. Do we think that it will be sort of quite controlled and a little bit boring, dare we say? The fact that gone are the sort of crazy days of drink and drugs, will that mean it'll just be sort of middle-aged men with guitars doing a bit of karaoke?
Well, Liam's gigs, have you seen any of it? I mean, I saw some of this Definitely Maybe anniversary tour, and it was so utterly thrilling. It was a reminder of how exciting Oasis are. It was actually good to see Liam not losing his voice, you know, really enjoying himself on stage. He still just stands still and glowers at everybody and occasionally bangs a tambourine, says something cryptic between songs. But when I see Oasis at their best, I want him not to lose his voice, not to disappear and miss 2 gigs in a row. You're paying a lot of money for these tickets. The excitement is they play these songs, the crowd sings them. It's a mutual thing. There's nothing more moving about a live show when it's the crowd completely united in song. It's the last great place of communal singing. That's what Oasis have got. They only made a couple of good albums and a bunch of decent singles, but those live shows, because the crowd loved them, and the crowd still loves them, the crowd of all ages loves them, will just be one big joyous sing-along.
The world is becoming increasingly complex and volatile. How can we make sense of it all?
I'm Richard Engel,
And I'm Yalda Hakim.
and we present Sky News' latest podcast, The World. Each week, we'll cut through the noise to guide you through the week's global events and explain to you why what happens out there matters to you wherever you are.
We're on the ground in some of the world's toughest places. Listen now to The World with Richard Engel and me, Yalda Hakim, wherever you get your podcasts.